Hello, welcome to another exciting JP Tech Talk. Today is the first day of Photoshop 101, kind of getting to know the basics for my Comtech 10 class. It's block 2 for me, a second time around. Some of you may have seen my first video posted a little while ago. This one's going to be the same topic, going through it again, but the block 2 kids hopefully will get a little further, and I'll fix any mistakes I made in the first go around. So take a look at this video. It's going to be awesome about the basics of Photoshop. If you're in my class, you would know that you already go to our classroom website all the time. We're going to go to the Comtech 10 visual composition section, and we can scroll down middle of the page, kind of halfway down. This tutorial that's already posted is the one that is going to be leaving us. It's a little bit long, has too much stuff that I would consider more of a medium to advanced skill level. It's not really a beginners of Photoshop. The one we're going to do today is more of a beginners of Photoshop, focused more on photo editing, just really simple things to get us started, and then down the road we'll make some new tutorials specifically about those more advanced skills, learning the different things. In order to get started though, we all need to have pictures that match. It's always better when you have pictures that are similar across the board. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to download those Photoshop images that we're going to work with today so that everybody has the same images. So if you're following along with me, which I hope you are, you would simply click on the link that says Photoshop tutorial images right here. This will take you to a Google Drive link or folder or whatever. I have pre-selected these folders for everybody. Whoops, let's go this way. We're going to use these because they work really well with the tutorial that I want to give. Obviously, that's the sort of the secret to doing any tutorial online, is picking images that work. So I know these will work for what we want to discuss today, and that's why I want you to have them. Otherwise, it's just really random if you're using your own images and nothing matches up. So please download these images. The best way to do that is if you just select the first image, hold the Shift key on your keyboard, select the last image, and then you should have the option to either right-click on one of the images and select download, or you can also do it, I believe, from the More Actions little 3-button thing here. You can also say to download. So whichever is easier for you. It's going to take a little bit of time. There's 32 of us trying to download the same set of documents from Google at the same time. So while they are downloading, it will create a zip folder and it'll drop it into our downloads folder for us. But while that is happening, we will go back to Photoshop and get some basic things set up in Photoshop, and then the images will be ready for when we need them. So again, if you didn't do it the first time, you select the first image, hold Shift, select the last image, you would right-click and select download, and then it will download them from there to your downloads folder. So just minimize that, don't close it, just minimize that. And then if you didn't already do it, bring up Adobe Photoshop. So when you open up Adobe Photoshop for the first time, it would actually come up with, this would be blank, there would be nothing here. As it is, I did this just an hour ago, so this is what comes up, is the image that we created last hour. But in the future, there will be a whole bunch of recently done images that will show up. So you can quickly get started on old projects, or you can move on with something new. And in this case, sort of our first skill or first thing we need to know in Photoshop is how to make a new document. There is, like everything in Photoshop, there's a million different ways to do something. There's very few times will I say this is the only way to do it. If I'm explaining a concept or a technique, it's the way that I do it. That doesn't mean that it's the million right, like perfect way. It just means that it's the way that I do it, and the way that I learned it, and the way that I've found works effective for working in Photoshop. There is always a different way to do something, and it might be better than the way I've done it, and I would be happy for you to show it to me so that I can learn from that. But generally, These are just the ways that I've learned to do things and the way that seems to work pretty good. So that was interesting. Someone's phone going off. Getting started here. Obviously, there's a giant button that says Create New. That would make sense that they want you to be able to create a new document. Also to open an old document. You can also do it from the top here, from File. You can open a new document, open an old document. You can browse in Bridge. You can open recent images. Lots of different ways. Or you can hit the shortcut on the keyboard is Control-N, brings up the new document window. So click on one of those three ways. You want to create a new document. In Adobe, this is Adobe CC 2019 version, or 2018, 2019. I think it was 2015 that they switched, or 2017, somewhere in between there. They switched to this splash screen new document window, which gives you a bunch of different presets for you to go into setting up different documents. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different photo related options. They've got some templates for photo collages, some cool things here that they've added in for you. They also have generic print-based material. So for most of what we're doing, we're going to be using letterhead, just standard letterhead paper, which is 8.5 by 11. Tabloid is 11 by 17. Sometimes you'll need to use tabloid to do your designs to make it just that much bigger. If you're making a movie poster, you're not going to make it 8.5 by 11. You would make it 11 by 17. So it's got a little more visual impact to it. They also have presets for art and illustration that are bigger and smaller, and web and mobile devices and film and video. Lots of different cool presets there that are ready to go for you so that you can get the right resolution and the right options. So we're going to go back to print though. Select letterhead 8.5 by 11. We are going to double check our specs on the right hand side here. This gives you all your specs for your document. So it is 8.5 inches wide. It is 11 inches tall. If we wanted it landscape, you would just simply flip this button here and it would flip your orientation to be 11 wide, 8.5 tall. In our case, we're going to leave it as portrait, and I'll show you why in a minute. Resolution 300 pixels per inch, RGB color mode, a white background. We're not going to get into the advanced stuff. It talks about color profiles and pixel ratios. None of that super important for us right now. That is definitely advanced stuff. What we do want to do though is give it a name. So this is just going to be image 1. Okay. Get in a habit of naming your new documents. Makes it easier for saving later. It just keeps it really simple. And we are going to hit create. So it should give you a nice big white document to get started with. Okay. This document, obviously blank, is still a document. It's a blank document, but it is a document. So we can save this document to a file location so that we know where everything is going to be and keep ourselves organized. So we're going to go to File, and we are going to say Save As. Okay, it's already saved to some random generic Photoshop directory. We don't want that because we don't know where that is. So we're going to do a File Save As, and that will bring up the save window palette, whatever you want to call it, for us to figure out where we want to save it. Now, I already did this with my first block class, so I'm going to back up and just explain things over again. So on the left-hand side of this toggle, you will see all the drives and locations for your computer. We want to go to our student F drive. So it will say your first initial, last name, and F drive, or the letter will be F. Within that F drive is where you are going to store all of your stuff. So in my case, I made a block 1 folder. I am going to right click and create a new folder. And this folder, I'm going to label this Comtech 10 block 2. Go figure, right? So that I can put my images and photos and stuff for you guys for block 2 all in the same file folder. Then I'm also going to double click on this, go in one more layer, because at times throughout the year we're going to be working with photos and Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and all the different Adobe programs. So we want to keep ourselves organized. So inside the Comtech 10 block 2 folder, we want to create another new folder that is for Photoshop specifically. Okay, and this is where all of our Photoshop related content is going to go. It's into this folder. So if I just hit save now, this image would save in the Comtech 10 block 2 folder. So I just need to select this Photoshop folder by double clicking it. And now when I hit save, the image one will drop itself into that Photoshop folder for me. So I hit save, it saves it in the background. And one might ask, did it really save? Do I trust that Photoshop saved my document appropriately? Well, let me tell you, we can go into Adobe Bridge, which is a partner program to all of the Adobe suite of programs, and we can find this image and make sure that it is where we are expecting it to be. So, if you haven't done so already, open Adobe Bridge. You go to Start, scroll down. Adobe Bridge is the yellowy orange BR one for Adobe Bridge. Click on that and it will open up Adobe Bridge for you. Now, Adobe Bridge is a great handy little program, and it is specifically for content organization and stuff. You can do a few little basic edits like rotate a picture and stuff right from within Adobe Bridge, but generally it is set up for content organization. It works really well with Adobe because it allows you to see Adobe files. It'll open like, I don't know, I'd say 90% of all the different Adobe files. What you can't see in just regular Windows Explorer, it allows you to see in Adobe Bridge. I always use the Essentials tab. Very few times will I use these other presets. There are times where they're handy, like this film strip one is great for organizing large quantities of photos and stuff. It gives you a very large preview window. The output one is to do with making like slideshows and different things, and combining multiple photos into one picture. You can, if you have like a whole bunch of pictures, you can make like basically some thumbnails, kind of a what we call a contact sheet. So you'd be able to set this up, highlight all these pictures, and then tell it to create the image using this contact sheet setup, and you'd have all your little images as thumbnails in there. This is something, I think this is new to 2019, but I could be crazy. I just may not have seen it in the 2017 version. But some handy stuff that they've brought in so that you can create different documents right from within Bridge. But again, it's more of an organizational. The documents aren't going to change. They're just what they are is what they are. But it helps you for printing. If you want to print a whole bunch of thumbnails and see what they're going to look like, you can just do that. So if I had all these images, I could drag them in here. It's going to put them all in there, and it gives you what their name is. So when we get into our photography section and we're making contact sheets, this is a super easy way to do that, but not something we're doing today. Metadata, keywords, a whole bunch of different stuff with regards to your photos, information, what the focal length was, who made it, where I got it from, all this kind of stuff, all is listed there. But Essentials is kind of where we live in the basic terms. It gives you nice big previews and thumbnails and allows you to go through your stuff. Now, obviously, I'm already in the Comtech Block 1. I already did this with the Comtech Block 1s. We want to go back and do this again with you guys. So We're going to go, I'm going to go to the F drive again, or all the way back. You can go all the way back to your desktop, depending on how far back you want to reset yourself. If you get confused, you can always go back to the beginning. We go into this PC, find our F drive, and then in our case, because it's block 2 now, we want to double click on the Comtech 10 block 2 folder, and this brings up our Photoshop folder, and there we have our magic white document, which is super boring. But it shows us that it's saved, and it shows us that it's saved in the right location. A cool little thing with Photoshop, or excuse me, with Adobe Bridge that I really, really like and is really handy for sorting photos and stuff is the ability to create favorite folders here. You can have your regular folder view, like all the folders, but this favorites tab is super handy. If I want to take the Comtech 10 block 2 folder, I can simply click on this and drag that link. Sorry, I gotta be on it. Here we go. Drag this to this favorites folder, and now when I click on the Comtech 10 block 2, it will automatically take me to that folder. So down the road, if you have it saved as one of your favorites, when you start the day and you're like, hey, I need to go to that folder, you go click, and there it is. Click, there's my various stuff, right? If you want to add a second layer and have your Photoshop in here as a folder by itself, you can do that. If you have too many folders, you screwed it up, you actually don't want it, all you have to do is right click and just say remove from favorites, and it will get rid of those extras. So I'm just going to have my Comtech 10 block 2 here up. And then we're going to go into Photoshop. So just double click. It will load the Photoshop folder. And now we are going to go find our how should we say, our download that we made. All those photos that downloaded into a zip file, we're going to bring them into here. So a couple different things. We could go into like Windows Explorer, we could go back, we could go to another tab. What you can do with Adobe Bridge is you can just go File, and you can say New Window, and it will basically give you a duplicate. So now I have 2 of them open, right? You guys have a dual monitor system on your computers. Excuse me. So you could potentially set this up so that one of these was on one screen, one of them was on the other. In this case, I'm just going to do it super confusing here and kind of have one hovering over top of the other. This hover one that's in front, I am going to search for the downloads that we just created. So again, we're going to go to this computer, and in the this computer button at the bottom, you should see, if I'm not mistaken, you should see a folder labeled as downloads. Now, this downloads folder could be a folder that is super handy for you. So you may want to add it into your favorites so that down the road, whenever you download a picture or whenever you save a picture to your computer that is in your downloads folder, it will go to this folder and you can click on it quickly, and then there is your downloads. Okay? Now, I don't know why this didn't go yet. It's stuck. Anybody else's get stuck? Whose pictures were able to download? Did everybody get them downloaded? Nope. Did everybody's get stuck? No, yours didn't? Okay. If it got stuck, refresh the page and try to download them again. Hopefully it will do it quicker round 2. I have these already downloaded, so I might get them from there, but I was hoping that this would work for you. you should have been able to find in your downloads folder here, you should have been able to find a zip file of your downloaded pictures. Who does not have the pictures that downloaded to your folder? A few of you? Anybody else missing the images, or the rest of you all got just a couple on the end here? I guess just us on the end of the row got hosed. I'm going to copy this. Oh, there it goes. So there is my Drive download. Did you guys try it again? Did it work this time, or? Oh, that's what we were looking for. So we go to this PC, and then you should go to your downloads, and you should see, it'll look a little different on your guys' computer. It will be a folder with like a zipper on it. That folder with a zipper, when you open that, double click on that folder, it should open up some kind of a file browser similar to this one. And then all you have to do is take those files, drag them into your folder, and it will unzip those files for you so that you have them available to use in your stuff. Okay? I see some of you already got that. You were way ahead of me somehow. If you didn't do that, again, find the original. So go to your Photoshop folder, or excuse me, to your downloads folder. You're going to open up this zip file. And you want to highlight all of these pictures. And you're going to, there's lots of options when you you can say extract to a specific folder, you can delete them, blah, 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 all this stuff. We're just going to copy files to clipboard. And then we would go to our Block 2 Comtech, Photoshop, and we would paste them into this folder. And then it's actually giving me this option or this warning saying that do I want to replace them? Because they were already here before. Do I want to replace them, skip, whatever I want to do? Adobe Bridge is really handy. If I said auto resolve, it would actually label the second one. It would go through and label the one that was a problem photo. It gives it a new name. So this one gives it like a bracket 1. So it creates essentially it's a duplicate. I'm going to end up deleting one of them. But if you're not certain, if you're trying to save some file folders or download a bunch of stuff and they have the similar names, a lot of cameras will label things with the same set of numbers and they just go around in circles. So one day you might get a bunch of photos that are labeled 100 to 200, and the next day they're all labeled 100 to 200 again. By dropping them into the same folder and using the auto function, it will rename them because they are different photos, but they just happen to originally have the same name. So I'm going to delete this second copy of this, and we will move forward. Okay? Does anybody still not have the images? Really? Okay. I'll come over quick and help you out. The rest of you, go back to Photoshop and get organized. I'll be right there. Yeah. That's fine. You still got to do the assignment. So it just means that you're like way ahead of the game. Okay. I think we're all back sort of on the same track. I'm sure some of you are trying to do this and freelance on your own and whatever else, but follow along with me, please, so that you all get the same results and the same pictures when we are finished. We've learned how to save a document. We've made a new document. We've learned how to download pictures. We've talked a little bit about Adobe Bridge. Some of the Photoshop tools here, really specifically, the newer versions of Photoshop, more and more they've added in little kind of like animated GIFs and things to help you understand what each tool does. So if you hover over slowly, you get these little animated GIFs of like what the tools could do, or I would call it a tool family could do. Because underneath every single one of these tools, there's the crop tool, but then if you click and hold, there's also the perspective crop and the slice tool, and they do different things. We tend to use the basic ones for the most part, but there are times, like I'll often tell you guys to fill something in with the paint bucket. Well, the paint bucket hides underneath the gradient tool. So you need to kind of know where it is and what's going on, and have a general idea of what tools are combined together. So like the magic eraser and the background eraser tool live with the eraser tool here. Yes, question. Like if you made a mistake and you want to go back? Yeah, actually that brings up a good point. In the new version, this new version 2018 of Photoshop, they changed a couple things. They changed, one was how you undo something. It used to be that you could only undo one time, and then it would just kind of alternate, which I really liked that functionality. So if I'll just paint something with a paintbrush here. My color palette is hanging off the bottom of this. I'm going to make this wider. Okay. So I want to paint something just randomly here. This is my lovely design that I've created. If I go Control Z, it steps back. In the old version of Photoshop, if I pushed Control Z again, it would just alternate for me. It would go back and forth. So you had to push Alt. Well, now they've changed it so that when you go Control Z, it goes back, and then when you do Control Z again, it goes back and back and back and back until the end of your like history, which is usually from the start of that day or the start of that time, or since you saved last, is when it keeps the history. So you kind of have to be a little bit careful as to what you're doing. The Control Z is not a be-all, end-all thing, but as you can see, I drew this as a square and then a J and a P, so I can go Control Z and it'll take away just the one step, and then Control Z again, and it keeps undoing all the different pieces. Okay, I assume that answered your question correctly. The button would be like edit, undo, but that's really clumsy. So the shortcut is Control Z on the keyboard, and that's the easy way to do it. So Control Z steps back one time. Another thing that they changed in Adobe was how pictures scale and stuff. So we are going to drop in our first image. So we're going to go File, Place Linked. And because we already saved our image, it's going to open up the proper folder for us. So we end up in our Comtech 10 Block 2 folder under Photoshop, and we want to find the Acne Confidence photo here. We're going to open this up. Now, it opens up as what Photoshop deems for it to be the what's called native resolution, or the same resolution that the photo was at when we found it. This photo is a very small photo, and it's a really good example of the sort of the magic of Photoshop, in the sense that normally in the past, even as recent as 2017 version, when you scaled this up to a full page size, it would do a very terrible job of interpreting what was going on. In the 2019 version, they have some auto functions built in. So when you scale this up, it's referencing the original image, and it's saying, okay, this should not be as blurry as this is. When you initially have your preview, it's going to look super, super, super blurry. But once we've scaled this to the size we want it, and hit enter, it will now adjust that photo and make the corrections to it to give you a much better quality finished photo. Now, if I wanted to change the size of that, in order to transform something, is what it's called, or to change the size of an image, which is something you do a ton in Photoshop, the shortcut is Control-T on the keyboard, or you can go to Edit, Transform, and say Scale. And by default, it will now scale proportionately. It used to, by default, it used to scale non-proportionately. So you'd have like this weird, you could really morph someone's face or do something really wacky with it because it wasn't scaling proportionately. But now with the new version of Photoshop, the default is to always scale proportionately. Now, that's not always, it's great for people's faces, like if that's what you want. It's not so great though if I like made a box and then wanted to scale this down the road. Now it's, oh cool, with boxes you can do it anyway. It's smart enough to know. It like changes it. So it must be identifying that that's a person's face or an object that's a photo. And whenever you use photos, it must be smart enough to know, because this is just a shape that I created, and by default I can do whatever I want. And then if I hold the shift key, it forces it to stay proportioned, which is the reverse, the exact reverse of transforming a photo. When I go Control-T, it's by default scaled proportionately, and if I hold the shift key, I can now morph it and do whatever I want to do to it. Now, I would highly advise not doing that, because you can really make someone look weird if you don't scale them properly. Okay? When you hit enter, it will save that transformation. It will get you out of that function, and you'll be able to then see the image the way it will look. Obviously, that's how to place an image, and that's how to change the size of an image. What if we wanted to, say, crop this image to a different size? Yeah. We would use the crop tool here to do this. And when it used to be that when you first clicked on it, you had to like draw a box or whatever. Now you first click on it and it has these handles, which depending on what you're doing might be handier or not handier, depends on how much you need to crop. I can bring these handles down, and because it's what we would call a non-destructive photo or a referenced photo, I can actually overcrop something. If I accidentally crop this and hit enter, and I'm like, whoa, what have I done? I didn't want that. Obviously, we could just go Control-Z and go back, but that Control-Z got back everything. Instead of us being able to go the other way. So now, if I crop this, Right? I've cropped it too much. If I just simply click on the crop tool the second time, that image is still there, and I can bring back everything that I cropped off. And I could even add, if I wanted to say have a white box all the way around an image, I could even add in extra image so that it would give me white space all the way around my image. This is actually a trick. I saw a tutorial where they were doing like making photos look like they were like Polaroid pictures kind of deal. And they had a whole bunch of pictures, and they actually ended up just like over cropping them all and adding a little bit of extra white background to all the images. And voila, it looks kind of like a Polaroid. In this case, this is not what we want. We want to crop just to the image size. So we're going to crop to the image, hit enter. There's our new cropped photo. And we are ready to move on to the next step. So that is image cropping. Okay. Obviously, this picture, there's a few different things you can do with it. One, you would be able to zoom in and look around the photo to see if there's any issues in it, or blemishes, or areas where you'd want to change some stuff. So you could use the zoom tool here, this magnifying glass, and you can zoom in like a crazy amount. If I hold the Alt key, I can zoom out then using the same tool. So by default, it's positive. Alt makes it go negative. You can also hold the mouse and slide it up and down. So when you click and roll your mouse left, right, it gets zooms in, or excuse me, zooms out, zooms in, depending on what you're doing. I'm just wiggling my mouse left and right, and it gives you kind of this flowed zoom, if you will. A good little handy thing is if I accidentally zoomed way in and got a little crazy, I can go Control 0 on the keyboard, and it will resize my image to be a full screen size best fit scenario. That Control 0 comes in incredibly handy a lot of the time, being able to zoom into a full screen size. Okay, so that is the zoom tool. We're going to talk about, obviously, photos can be edited a number of different ways. The most obvious is things like taking out red eye or blemishes or issues in a photo. Well, in this case, we have a prime example of some blemishes that this is not this girl normally. This just happened to be a bad day, obviously. But at the same respect, this kind of birthmarky mole over here might very well be there all the time. So when you are doing blemish removal, or you're making adjustments to people's skin shape, skin tone, facial features, all that kind of stuff, you need to make sure that you're doing it in a proper, respectful way, that you're not changing who that person is. It's one thing to take out something that's going to be gone in a couple weeks just to touch up the photo to give their best impression. It's a totally another thing to change their eye color or do something else that's not normal to that person. Now, is that a fun, functiony, cool thing you can do in Photoshop? Of course. But then you need to understand that you're now creating a new image that is not the likeness of this person. In this case, though, we're working on photos that we want to edit and just tweak. So we're going to use the clone stamp, or excuse me, the spot healing brush tool. The spot healing brush tool, if you select that, will allow you to make edits to this photo. If I click on it, though, it says this smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Editing contents will no longer be available. Do I want to rasterize the smart object? I'm going to say no, I don't. I'm going to say cancel. And that's because I don't want to lose the effect of this original. I don't want to wreck the original photo. So I am going to right click on it, and I am going to duplicate this layer. Okay. Duplicate the layer. It just gives it the same name but says copy. I'm going to say OK. So now I have two layers of the same thing. The underside layer, I'm going to turn off, turn the little eyeball off on it. And the top layer, this layer, I am going to rasterize it. So I'm going to say rasterize layer. And that flattens it and it makes it uneditable. Once I save this file, I wouldn't be able to tweak it again. This file is now whatever the new file becomes because it's flat. I can't go back to the original state that it's in. But that is why we saved this, because if we make a really critical messed up error, we have our backup and we can just copy it again. In this case though, we have our clone stamp tool, or excuse me, our spot healing brush tool. And if you notice now it's changed to a circle, so I could use it. We need to know though, like size wise of the brush makes a big difference. If I scale the brush way up and click over her eye, the computer is going to do some crazy stuff and make her eye disappear. Okay, obviously not what I wanted. To change the brush size, I want to right click and I can set the size and I can also set the hardness of the brush. So if I want it to take a really sharp sample or a really soft sample. In this case, we're fixing blemishes, so we want a soft sample of the space. Spacing, we're going to not fiddle with that right now on this one. And then we have our size. Now if I go over outside of this box, I can see the size is still pretty small, so I might want to bring this up. But sometimes you're like, what did I do? Now it's still giant, right? Or maybe it's still too big for what you were doing. You want to be able to, oh, what have I done? You want to be able to just change your brush size on the fly like I am right now. And you do that with the right square bracket on your keyboard. So it's above the enter key on the standard keyboard is the right square bracket. And to the left of that is the left square bracket. And that will make your brush size get smaller and bigger, kind of on the fly, if you will. That way you can kind of be going around your picture, making it bigger, making it smaller, depending on what you're taking out blemish-wise. The hardness can be changed here on a regular basis. But so now with my soft brush, I would highlight the blemish I want to get rid of, and I simply watch it disappear. Okay? You can take out these kind of brow lines if you felt that was needed. It kind of makes her head look ultra soft, which I guess, depending on what magazine you're looking in, would be normal to the magazine, but that sometimes can take away the character of a person. If you are doing a photo of your grandpa and he's got a wrinkly forehead and you take out all those wrinkles, it's going to change his overall look and it's not going to be true to life for that person. So probably not the best use of this tool. But in this case, it works great for taking out these kind of blemishes and skin imperfections. Stuff that would normally, on a better day, maybe not have shown up. But for this particular photo, happened to be there. Okay? You don't want to go too crazy. We want this to look real. Whenever you're doing photo edits, unless you're doing some sort of surrealist kind of weird arty kind of project, if you're just touching up photos of people, you want it to look normal and natural. So you don't want to overcorrect or over edit a photo. So that is how to get rid of blemishes and to crop and to do an image place, all kinds of different techniques there. Once you have this photo kind of where you like the look of it, and you've removed the majority of the blemishes, things are looking good, you can certainly now save this and we will go on to our next image. So we're just going to go at the top here, File, Save. We've already given it a location. We know where it's saving. If you hadn't given it a location and you weren't sure where it was going to save, I would highly recommend making sure that you do that so you don't lose your image and it doesn't get lost into computer la la land someplace and never to be found again. Does anybody have any questions so far on this? No? Pardon? I can't hear you. It didn't work? When you go file place? Oh, so highlight all those. So select those. Yeah, and then drag them back to the other folder. No, into the big folder. The big spot in the middle of the picture. Yeah, let go. There you go. Okay. So moving right along, we've saved this. We're going to close just this picture. Don't close Photoshop. The top right-hand X is Photoshop. This picture, though, has its own X that we can close. And because we've saved it, it'll save and we're good to go. We now want to open up one of the other pictures that we have available and make some edits to that, and then we'll save it. So if you click open this time, again, it's going to go back to that folder that we've already been working in. If this was not the folder you were looking for, you could go anywhere else and figure it out. In this case, though, this is the folder that we're looking for, and we're going to go in and we want to open up this John Wall photo here, this basketball player photo. So just double click on it and it will open up into Adobe Photoshop. Okay, generally this photo is good. It's a neat technique. They used lights on either side of them, created some cool kind of depth and shadows and stuff. But we want to monkey around with this and play with layers and some selections and colors and stuff. Really specifically, you can do some cool things with Photoshop to adjust the entire photo or just certain parts of the photo. Because we have opened this photo as just the actual original image, if you look at the bottom here, your layer panel has a lock on this layer. That is so you don't mess it up, because the background, you sometimes don't want the background to change, but that can very easily be removed just by clicking on the lock, and you get rid of the lock, and now you can make adjustments to that layer. We don't really want to mess up the original, so I always recommend people make a duplicate layer. An easy way to duplicate a layer, like I said, you could, in the other one we right-clicked and we made duplicate layer. Another fast way is just to take this layer and drag it to the new layer button here. It's the second in on the right, and when you let go, it will make an automatic copy of that layer. And then that allows us to make some edits to this layer with the freedom of, if we screw up, we can just delete it and we go back to the original and we start over, and we haven't actually wrecked our one and only copy of this image. In this case, though, we want to make sure that we're doing things as non-destructively as possible. When I first started editing with Photoshop, like 10 years ago now, I guess, maybe more even, they didn't have Smart Object. They didn't have the functionality of non-destructive editing. If you painted on something, that's what you did. And you could still layer things up, but generally you didn't have the option of going back later and making adjustments and doing it in a way that it doesn't affect the original. It always affected the original. So in this case for today, if you go to your adjustments panel, so it's next to libraries if you're in the essentials view, You can find it in the window adjustments. This window adjustments will pop it up as well. You can see that there's lots of what are called adjustment layers. And these adjustment layers do different things. So brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, hue and saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, channels, all kinds of different things. Okay? You can go to the, I like going to the hue and saturation one. And when you click on hue and saturation, it at first doesn't really do too much. But if I start messing now with the hue, you can see that it's changing the tone of my image. If I wanted to make everything the same color, maybe I want to give it all like a reddish hue, I could go to colorize, and it's now going to hue everything the same. So there's different strengths and different saturation levels of that color, and I can also adjust the saturation. Maybe I go kind of crazy over the top. Everything's really, really green, right? As I adjust that saturation, now I get a combination of black and white and a little bit of that tone, kind of for an effect. That same thing works without the colorize attached. I can go through my colors, I can change the brightness, the darkness of the overall image, or I can also change the strength and saturation of the image. So when it's full saturation, it's oversaturated. There's a 0 mark here, and then 0 saturation means that there's 0 hue or there's 0 tones. So essentially it becomes a black and white image. So having a black and white image is really cool, but having an image where there's a pop of color gives you that reference, or gives you that like really strong image, I think, at least. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this basketball colored, and everything else we will keep black and white. So our hue and saturation layer essentially is doing its job. It's desaturating our photo. It's taking everything down to 0. We want to go in, and by default, because it's a adjustment layer, it has what's called a mask. And this mask is covering up our entire image. So if you imagine, if you went to a dinner party and it was a mask party or whatever, you would be wearing a mask to cover up your face. So wherever that mask is, so in this case, wherever it's white, it is covering up the original colors from our original document. If I take a paintbrush and select this layer mask, I have 2 options. I can continue to paint with white, which obviously does nothing, or I can alternate to the black. I can do that by clicking this switch arrow button, and it will switch black to be my color. Or I can use the D key on the, or excuse me, the X key on the keyboard, and I can switch back and forth between foreground color and background color. If I select black and I paint on a white mask, I am essentially cutting holes in that mask to allow the original color to shine through. Now, if I do it in a detailed manner, so if I zoom in on this basketball and I make my brush an appropriate size, for things like this where you need detailed, obviously a super soft brush not going to help you, but a super hard brush can sometimes be awkward as well. So I like to go around the 80% range, and that gives me like a brush that's not super detailed, but also not like super soft either. And I am going to paint as best as I can. Normally you'd want to use like a stylist or whatever, so you can draw I can draw a lot simpler when my hand is in a proper, or a lot more steady, I should say. I can draw more steady and more accurate when my hand is drawing the way I normally write with a pen. And so you can get a stylus and do that. Now, I like to think I've gotten pretty good with a mouse, so I'm going to do this. And don't be afraid. Sometimes it's easier to go over to overshoot. Hit the X key, switch to white, and paint back in the stuff that's supposed to be black and white. Okay. Generally, as I say, I'm good with a mouse, and then promptly just paint right over top of a finger. Generally, you're good to go here. Now, a cool little tip, when you're zoomed in like this, and you're trying to move around the image quickly, you can hold the space bar on the keyboard and it will bring up the hand move tool, and I can quickly just drag my image around on the screen so that I can get to the new place that I want to be. If you use the Z key on the keyboard, it is the, unless you're typing, if you're typing, the Z key is the Z. If you are in with another tool and you push the Z key on the keyboard, it will bring up the zoom tool. That is the shortcut for the zoom tool, so that I can zoom in, and then again, spacebar moves me around. The B key on the keyboard is the brush shortcut. That allows me to go back to my brush without having to click on the brush in the panels tab there, or in the tool tab. Generally though, we just zip around this image. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to show me that you understand the concept of adjustment layers, and that adjustment layers have masks associated with them. Okay. So we've almost got this figured out. Now when I do my Control-0, I get zoomed all the way back out again, and I see that we have a black and white image with a color basketball. Okay, so gives you a really cool effect. You could do the same thing. You could make his jersey appear and everything else be black and white. You could bring his skin tones back in, and everything else would be like grayscale. So there's lots of different cool things you can do with an image. You often see this done with like ladies' makeup, where they've got a red lipstick and they've highlighted the red lipstick by doing this effect, or in like car advertisements where everything else is black and white, but there's like a blue car on the street. So simple effect brings some really cool emphasis to the picture and makes life really easy there. We are going to make sure that we save this, so we're going to go File, and we are going to Save As. It should bring you into your same folder that you've been in all day, back to your Photoshop folder. But now this is going to be image 2. So this is image 2. We hit save. Push OK again. And now we have image 2. Now I know class is going to end in like 5 minutes here. So we will probably shut this down for today. If you have questions, you can email me. If you want to contact us at our channel, that's awesome. Please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff helps us out. Any topics of discussion you'd like us to make a video on in the future, let me know. Other than that, Have a good time.